bit about, you've been doing some amazing things up in Cleveland,
Yeah.
running your school, all boys.
All boys. Yep.
All boys school. So tell us about it, your work up there. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So I'm from Cleveland. I've been back in Cleveland now 4 years. So I left. So born and raised in Cleveland. Different elementary schools throughout. Middle school, high school. I went to East Tech, so the best high school on 55th in Woodland. And so from East Tech, my mom did everything she could to get me into Morehouse. So single mom, Morehouse.
Any Morehouse people here? Any Morehouse bros in here?
I see a couple. No, I don't see any. No.
We've had a few come through.
We may have some. So I went to Morehouse. The interesting thing about, doing an education program at Morehouse is that most of your classes are at Spelman. And so,
interesting.
Yeah. So when they talk about, behind every strong black man, like you're literally being developed educationally by the women at Spelman. And so,
wow,
huge factor. So I did, from Morehouse, I went about a mile away and did student teaching, and then taught in Atlanta for about 7 years. We left Atlanta, went to New Orleans, worked in New Orleans for a couple years, in the Calio, so we did some school turnaround. And so interesting, when I was in New Orleans, one of the things that we did was a vision board. And so I made a 3D vision board the first year I got to New Orleans about the Terrance Mitchell Boys Academy in Cleveland. And it's crazy because 2 years later, I was back in Cleveland, at an all-boys school. And so, yeah, I think it was exactly where I needed to be. It was with who I needed to be with. And it couldn't have happened better. It couldn't have happened better. It couldn't have been with a better group of students, a better team around me. And so I'm super, super happy to be back in Cleveland. It's interesting. Sometimes you think about when you come back to a place, the things that you could have missed out on. And so one of the things I think about is like losing some family members. So coming home and then being able to spend some time with them, which is huge. And I think that how just important that is. I think even like a month ago, I lost my great grandmother. And so it was huge to be back, to have my kids back and family to, really, really spend that time. But when we talk about the grittiness of Cleveland, there's no place like it, no education.
Aww. So, there's definitely people also showing you love. There's Best Principal in Cleveland. Listen, stop paying people to say that, Terrance. No, I'm just kidding.
That looks like alumni.
That's real. That is awesome. And I've also been following a lot of your work that you're doing with your all-boys school. And I'm particularly, I think so tonight, again, the live chats, the purpose of it is really to lean into our educational community. Just show up authentically. This is not like a keynote or anything. We're just wanting to bring school leaders and teachers from across the country together to have real conversations, to have fun, engage with one another, get to know like who are the leaders on the front lines, and what are they doing right now? What are the challenges that they're experiencing? What are the places where they're experiencing success? All for the purpose of really elevating our communities and being able to walk away with, after just 20 minutes of being on this live, with some like concrete things that people could walk away with. So for those of you who are just coming in, rep your letters if you're Greek. And in the meantime, while people are doing that, Best Principal in the city #1. Okay, Barhood. Shout out to Barhood.
Talk about it.
VIP tonight. All right. So listen, Terrance, tell us a little bit about some of the things that you've been doing with your school community. All boys. Is it all elementary school?
Yeah. So it's pre-K to 8. So
pre-K to 8th grade.
Pre-K to 8. We have about 220 boys. So I feel like that's the perfect number. One class per grade level. So everything is very intimate.
Yes.
And it's interesting because you really get a chance to be hands-on. And so when I think about the connections that we make and why this thing works so well, I saw a podcast or a TED Talk in 2013, a lady named Rita Pearson. And so she passed away. It's crazy. She passed away like 6 months after. But she talks about how everybody needs a champion. And when I think about whenever I go somewhere, like I'm like the only black man in the room. And so, it's interesting, the dynamic between black male fatherhood and like the black man in education, because they're few and far between. And if we all think about, have you had a black male teacher in your life? And have you had a powerful black influence? And so few people can say, yeah, I may have had one.
Right.
And it's just like the same number of few people that say that I had a father at home. And I know like some of my high school friends, none of us had a dad at home. And it's interesting like that dynamic, is transferred over to education and education reform. And so, when I was a teacher, I thought that we make a huge impact in your classroom. And then as an instructional coach, you make an impact in the subject area that you are teaching teachers. But you couldn't have had a greater impact than being like a phenomenal school leader. And so some of the things that I learned from New Orleans and abroad, like when they come into the door for 4 years straight, before they even come in the door, we shaking hands. They got to come through the metal detectors, and it's interesting that they have the metal detectors, but we try to take all of the negative aspects of what school should traditionally feel like. And we really change it around with literally 4 black men in our school, and only one of them is a teacher. He's our dean of, he's our athletic director, our coach, and our PE teacher. But our students literally have no one that is instructing them as relates to math, science, social studies that is a black man. And so what we've tried to do at our school to build that capacity and that culture is, like, before you come in, we're shaking your hand. We talking to you, we meeting you outside, rain, sleet, or snow. And every day we have a morning meeting. And so I know we talk about why it's important to have social emotional learning and why it's important to build gaps and remove barriers. And a lot of times we talk about it, but don't actually implement it or don't know how to implement it. And so, each and every day it's a morning meeting. Each and every week it's an hour-long meeting. And so we're doing different chants. We're shouting out birthdays. We're celebrating them. And one of the things that I think that Rita really hit on was that kids won't learn from somebody that they don't like. And I want to be a person that the kids can, they can text me, they can call me. We have about 10 different Instagram groups with different groups of kids. And we talk and we laugh and we remove these barriers.
Yes.
And so those are things that, we open up our hearts. I think that they've seen me cry. They've seen me share my story. And I want them to know that no matter how much we get on them, like, they always have, a home within me. And so that's been huge. And so, I want for every 200 boy that's at our school, they will be able to leave and say, I remember what Mr. Mitchell did.
Yeah.
Remember how he made me feel.
And there's really, man, it is absolutely powerful. And like, it really, really changes the game for our kids when they have black male presence, black males leading their schools, and black males that are also like invested in them. The fact that you are the first person or your team is the first person that they see every morning, that they're shaking your hands, that they're starting off with that collective community every morning, that does something, right? Like, that routine does something to our kids. So I heard you talk a little bit about how you're building culture with them even now that you're, like, physically distant, but not socially distant. Through Instagram groups. Talk a little bit about that. People are like, facts. People are loving this. Biggest role model.
So it's funny because I think many of them were like, man, Mr. Mitchell is in this group chat. And so, some of the things that we try to teach them how to do is how to be social. You know what I mean? We say go out and, be friendly or be respectful. And we just expect them to have these skill sets, or we want them to be able to publicly speak. And so we had to go in and teach them how to, to have conversations but still be authentic.
Yeah.
Recognizing, you'll have a conversation with your classmates that's a little different than what you have with Mr. Mitchell. But I think most of the guys in our groups literally spend more time in our group conversations than they do isolated. And so that's some of the comfort that we've built. It makes me think about, this work that we're doing. Like, am I inspired or am I motivated? And I think that most of the kids are, feeling more inspired by the things that we talk about, because easily they could become unmotivated when they leave our space. but if they are inspired, there's something that's a little longer lasting. And
So I
so,
want to
yeah.
let me just name something that you said, Terrance, which I think is something that we often forget, and it is that what you're focusing on is very strategically social intelligence, right? Like you mentioned, and this is so true. Like our kids, we expect them to just know how to engage in conversations with one another. Yes, like they typically have that, but then it's how do you engage with other people and still show up as your authentic self? Because oftentimes, I think it was with Ahmed on Wednesday night, he was talking about like how we often can't show up. Like the system does not allow for us and our boys and our community to show up authentically. And so we have to somehow like learn that. So I'm interested to also know like, what are some of the topics that you guys talk about?
Oh man. So in my most recent group, we've talked about retention and what the expectation is for them going forward. It's funny because a couple of them were like, "Man, now that the COVID is here, I'm good. We can go to. I'm ready to move on to 10th grade." And so, we had a conversation. Everybody was putting up the little eye emojis, and some of them were like, "Man, no, it ain't. It's not going to be that easy." And so we have other kids that are giving other kids, their classmates, feedback. And then even if they go to different high schools, they're like, "Nah, man, like that ain't cool. That ain't cool." You know what I mean? I got another guy we were talking about just some family issues. I know a couple of years ago we wrote we compiled a collection of kids' writings, and they wrote letters to their fathers. And so
Wow.
the conversations are about, stepdads that are in their lives and how they make them feel. How do we navigate those conversations and be respectful to the man that is stepping up, but also being conscious that, that as a young man, that there are boundaries that we can't address as young men, but we allow other people to be able to go to bat on our behalf. And so it's all kind of things. We do a Zoom, so every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday we're teaching class from 10 to 1, and pre-K to second, 3 to 5, 6 to 8. And so I got some kids on there. We're talking about Pythagorean theorem, 8th graders. And one of my roughest kids is like, "Man, I don't know why them other dudes not on here." And I'm like, "Man, Jerome, you're right. But you teach them how to have that sense of accountability.
Yeah.
How to really lean on somebody, and that's been a huge part. But even, like you said with Ahmed, and I heard him talking about us being able to show up, but so much of, our normalcy around education really forces us to put our blackness aside. And then for boys, really putting that masculinity aside. And so those are things that we try not to do. So like at our school, recess is mandatory. Got to get outside and play. If you're in K through 2nd grade, you get 2 recesses a day. One at 11:30, one at 2 o'clock. Because if we are aware of
developmentally appropriate.
Absolutely. And if you got a lunch attention, then you can eat lunch with a teacher. But after that, you need to be able to get outside and do those things. And so, when we are oftentimes forced to downgrade our energy and hide our blackness,
minimize,
those are issues that we have. And I mean, Carter G. Woodson talked about it best when he talked about the miseducation of the Negro. And he talks about, like, we are taught in a way that allows us to, one, separate from our own blackness, and then be able to work in other communities and under other societal norms. And then it forces you don't even have the skill set anymore to be able to come into your own community and thrive. And on the other hand, we're teaching, different groups of people and different minorities or even immigrants to come in, and we teach them ways to thrive in the Black community, whether that be to open up certain restaurants or beauty supply, and we don't teach that to our own kids and our own people. And I think that our students appreciate that authenticity that I give to them. I take them to different graduations. I take them, I took some kids, hell, we went to Best Buy one day, about 5 kids. And so, like, man, you can literally touch everything in here. And, like, that's huge. And so those are things that, we try to I try to dispel from our teachers, and those are things that we taught our educators, you know, not to have these low inference expectations for them, like they can't do it because they're boys or because they're black.
Yeah.
No, they're going to be the highest performing kids that we know. And I think it speaks to where we've been. Like when I came to our school, unfortunately it was an F, and in 2 years we moved it to a C, and we got guys that are like thriving, and people come to our school like, man, send them to our high school. And so, you know, when you're authentic, you know, when you remove barriers, and then when you are honest and truthful with the kids, I mean, there's no stopping them. And even with teachers, man, when I initially would show them data and how the kids are performing, and they were taking it very personal, and we just have conversations like, no, it's not about you, you know.
Right.
If they don't attain this, you know, I don't want them to have these high averages throughout, because then if that means, then what are you teaching if everybody gets it every single time, and that's the expectation. But if we are, you know, looking at an opportunity for them to attain this greatness, and then this is the goal, and we're getting them to that end, like, then that is a true measure of what we are doing. And so, like, those are things that I think are huge, and that's why I think that, you know, I'm where I'm supposed to be at this time.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's clear you're doing some great work. And let me just shout out a few people. We got Principal Hodges. He's an alpha. We have Principal Morales, who's my sister up in Jersey, LTA. See,
New
there's more of
Orleans.
us parents trying to act like,
I
what's
see
that
New Orleans.
story?
We got New Orleans in the building.
We got New Orleans. We have to, someone said we have to code switch as Black people. What are your thoughts on that, Terrance?
So interesting. When I first went to New Orleans, the first thing that I had to realize was that I'm not here to teach them phonetics. You know, there's a poem that I share. It's called Ebonics 101, and it just talks about like no, this is the dialect, you know, that we've been passed down. You know, this is the things that my grandmother said when she was coming and was taught to her. So
yeah,
you know, I think that there is a finesse game to this thing, as there is with everything. Everybody has to play the system, but I never feel like we have to code switch. I never feel like I have to diminish my blackness or my masculinity. I've shared some of these like poems and different things at a principals institute with, you know, 100 some odd principals and the CEOs and the chiefs, and people who came up to me and was like, man, I needed to be heard. So no, I think you should wear it as a badge of honor. You know what I mean? And never hide it. Never hide it. If people, you know, don't understand the slang and all those things, then, you know, sometimes that's on them. You know what I mean? And you are who you are, and you know your skill set will take you. But if we develop you in the way that, you know, it's advantageous for your personal skill set, we'll get you to where you need to go.
Right.
And so, you know, a lot of the. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead. You said a lot of people.
I was saying a lot of the people who, you know, who are rappers who came from, you know, the drug game or whatever, you know, those are guys that are highly intelligent. They can conceptualize numbers. They make connections. And they can put words together. But no one harvested that talent.
Right. Right.
And so, you know, that's where that get it out the mud. I want you to get it out the mud, and I want you to win in everything that you do. So.
That's what it's about. I love how, one, there's definitely like Greek unity tonight. Someone said Greek unity. There's quite a bit of Kappa in here as well.
1911 was a good year.
Any cues out there to support Terrance over here?
Oh man!
Also, someone said, "Are you published, Terrance?"
No. So everything that we've written down. So a couple of the books that we have, we've done some just self-publishing and self-distributing of some of those books as well. I thought that I had one. Oh, let me get one. So here's one that we did. It's called Letters to Our Fathers. And so if you guys, you shoot me a message, or Noemi, we can get it out to you. But
yeah,
it's huge. It's probably the most powerful piece of literature that I've ever read. And it's like kids really explaining to their fathers, like how you made me feel. And the first one is one that I wrote to my dad, and how he made me feel, and, you know, things that I go through. And some of the mishaps and the missteps that I made, like I directly attribute to your absence. And so, those are things that I think, we got to keep rocking and rolling. I think I see some other principals. My buddy, I think my buddy Dre is on here. He's at Kennedy here in Cleveland. Faces the same barriers, the same obstacles, that many of us face. We all face a lot of that. Whenever we think about downsizing and reduction of staff, oftentimes it's minorities, and then even more per capita is the black male. And so, we want to teach our kids to work the system, be sufficient in the system, but also find ways to be self-sustaining and self-sufficient as well.
Terrance, I want to hear from you because we have quite a few brothers on here who are school leaders, principals, or executive directors, superintendents. What would you say is do you feel, and there are obviously many that I cannot relate to because I'm a woman, but as a black male in education leadership, what do you see as one of the reoccurring or top challenges that you are running into?
So I think the first thing is representation. And so if we think about where the principal is, then who is the person that is above the principal that advocates for us as black men? And I think that that's one thing that's missing. One of the programs that we have in Cleveland is called MOCA, which is Men of Color, Helping and Shaping Academics. So it's an intentional group that our district has put together to really support black men of color. But interestingly enough, we went to one of the forums, and one of the people who was speaking was a college student. And so while he was very articulate, one of the things that, we looked at was that they are not acknowledging the power that's in our space. And so when you look beyond, your community, then, that means that you don't see or value the wealth in the room. The other thing is understanding that young men of color need more equitable opportunities in education. And so for our district, it's crazy because we have 5 out of 88 schools are single gender. 3 are boys schools, which are 2 K-8s and 1 high school, and 2 are girls schools. And the three that are in jeopardy of closing are boys schools. And so, when we think about, if we think about equity, we talk about understanding the plight of the young black boy and young black girl as well.
Yeah.
But we think about, what's going on, and then the funding system is exactly the same for all tiers. And so, I don't think that that's where the equity piece comes in. And I don't think that, if we talk about these structured, very small, focused classrooms for young men to be able to thrive in, to have space to stretch, like us with 200 kids, like we've been practicing social distancing for the last 4 years. Like we have space, we spread out, we allow the thoughts to fill the room versus having a packed classroom. And so that has been to the detriment, of how we are funded. And so those are things that I think that are often concerns. They're often asked us to be the disciplinarians. We probably have more black deans in our district than we have black principals. And you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
there's a lot of that happening in our communities where the black male becomes the disciplinarian.
Yeah.
In a lot of schools.
Yeah, and it's the same. If we think about those who had a black father in the home, who was a disciplinarian, you know what I mean? And then if we were to ask everybody, like, who was your favorite teacher? It's probably, the black woman who was taught to, love, be forgiving, you know what I mean? And to do all those things. And as a young black student, you have this person who has let you slide, who has let you be late a couple of times, who has helped you with some tutoring.
Yeah.
And then we put the black man in a position where he has to suspend or break up fights, and not be at a space where they could pour into him. And so those were things that when I think about our school, those are things that we intentionally shifted as it relates to roles. Like our dean, like, nah, he's the leader of PBIS. So, when I'm passing out ice cream and we're doing songs, like, you got to be there. So, if a kid didn't make it, you know, somebody else got to hold them. But our dean who picks you up when you are, you know, having a rough time in class is the person who's celebrating you. You know what I mean? Our special ed assistant dean is there, so you got to be present. And one thing I really push for the brothers in our building is to be the person who loves them and loves on them abundantly and shows them what love should feel like. Whether or not you had it or not, or experienced it or not, you know what you would have wanted to experience as well.
So there's a question here, Terrance. It says, what kind of restorative practices should we use to support our Black boys who struggle to self-regulate?
So one of the things that I got from Columbia was the ruler or the mood meter. And
Love it.
One of the things that I do is I print them out and I post them. And some of the things that we do every morning is like do a check-in. I'll post it very big on the.
I love that you're using the ruler method.
Absolutely. Like, how are you feeling, man? Like, you might come in and say, I'm on red, I'm low energy and I'm low pleasant, and I'm really feeling like angry. And so if a kid can identify how they are feeling without us trying to get to this method of fixing, you know, our young Black boys, like, no, just ask questions, create a space where,
and just be, allow them to be and to teach them how to process their emotions. So by the way, what he's referring to is emotional intelligence. The practice is from the Yale Emotional Intelligence Center, which by the way, Terrance, we're actually we're in pre-launch right now, but we're starting a Cultivate Community, like 14-day program where we're going to be teaching school leaders and teachers from across the country. We're going to start with a small cohort, and the mood meter will be a part of that. Like, how do you, especially now in this time, how do you check in with kids? I think restorative practices, I think what we often miss in it is that we use it once a kid has done something, right? Once they've been suspended or once they have like disrespected someone. So we put them in a circle afterwards, which is good. It's important. But like, what are the strategies that we're teaching them even before they get to that? So to your, who asked that question? Principal Jean Lewis. So yeah, this is the part about like the self-regulation part, right? Teaching them on the back end is helping them reflect on what happened, but teaching them emotional intelligence, how to check in with their feelings during, like, every day. Just make it a norm, make it a habit. It's a skill. And it's so powerful that you're doing that with all of your young men that you're serving.
Being able to record it, so I think kids can then go back to the day and the time and the action that had them feeling that way. The other side is then what are we putting in place, you know, on the opposite end. So one of the things that I put in our school is a fitness center. So we have a punching bag, a treadmill, you know, some weights, a balancing.
I've seen you like working out with some of your boys.
So they get it in. Like even our littlest guys can, you know, step on the balance beam and get some of that off. You know what I mean? But I think also having the daily check-ins and being able to track that behavior and then celebrating them, you know, like every day won't be a perfect day. And so if we're able to then maybe quantify how we want you to move per kid. So if your expectation is 6 out of 10 very solid days, you know, but one of the things that I felt is interesting when I was in New Orleans, I did an interview at a charter school with high compliance. And then I went to New York for a charter school interview. And one of the things that I thought was the most offensive thing was, you know, this discipline for routine structures and behaviors that a boy could just simply have. Discipline for, you know, restroom breaks and, you know, discipline for shirts not being tucked in or the wrong shoes. And so we've seen so much of that. You know, but it comes to the point where, you know, as an educator, I'm a teacher first, or as a principal, I'm a teacher first, and I'm going to teach the people who are teaching our most precious cargo. And so if we don't develop the people that are touching them every day, you know, who knows what they'll do, you know what I mean? And so being very
So,
small, we could really just hit them, very often. And I can be in the classroom all day, every day, like clockwork. Um,
so two questions for you, Terrance.
yeah.
There's some people here saying, someone said, "What's up, Mitchell? It
What's
has
up,
to be a
Mordecai?
part of the climate and culture." Absolutely. So I want to ask you two questions as we begin to wrap up, and then you can
Okay.
wrap up with whatever thoughts you may have. So, what is one of the things right now that you are most proud of as it relates to your school, your team, building culture with your boys, even being apart? And here's a question. I'm kind of going to turn it on you a little bit, but it's a
All
question,
right.
one of your icebreaker questions that you proposed. And your question was, what's one of the things that scare you the most?
Mm,
And I'm interested to know maybe like, what is it that scares you the most right now?
okay. So I'll start with that. I think one of the things that scare me the most
And
is,
Terrance, excuse me, if
yeah,
anyone also wants to tap into and write in what scares them the most or what they're most proud of, we'd also love to hear from you as well.
yeah, yeah, I would as well. What's up, Chicago? The Q, what's up, Q?
Speak
So,
well, King.
so
And so he said, someone else said he's his
it's
school feels
cool.
like a family, and it shows.
It definitely. Thank you. Thank you. That's one of my. I remember when I was in high school, I used to jump in her pool in the backyard, and now
Oh, look at that.
our son is at my school. Isn't that crazy? So I
Yeah.
would say one of the fears, my biggest fear, is like losing one of our students, and I stay up at night, tossing and turning, about the unknown at times, and so. I think as a principal, you play the role as a pastor, as a as a school psychologist, as a shoe tire, as a, you distribute laundry and deodorant, and so you wear so many hats. I've been to so many funerals, as it relates to my staff, of their parents and their relatives, and I went to one of my students. His mom passed away this year, and one of the things that keeps me up at night is losing, whether it's one of my boys from Atlanta or from New Orleans, or from Cleveland. Those are one of the things and one of the fears. I also fear them being, arrested while being black. One of the things that I share with people, I was sharing with a brother at Florida State who's doing his PhD. He said, well, what was a moment that changed your life, that felt like normal and you didn't think it was like a big thing? And so I would tell him, I remember in seventh grade being arrested on the public transportation, because we were on the train laughing and, just kids having a good time, and not really understanding when my mom came down to pick me up, this guy had me in handcuffs, from the time he picked me up from the train to the time that he took me downtown. And I remember my mom coming in like livid. And so, and I'm at a kid like, Mom, like, let's not make them mad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she's going off, articulating that, no, like, you're a kid. And, for them to like demonize you at this age, and so like that was huge. And it was crazy because, right at that moment, I was already being introduced to the system. And
Yeah.
so, my fears, when we have officers who come to our school, it is the expectation that you are, inviting, that you are welcoming, and that
Yeah.
these young men, that you are here to serve them, not to be of a hindrance to them. And so those are things that, when I wake up in the middle of the night, or if I hear my phone ringing, or if I get a ping from our group chat from our boys at night, those are some of the things that I think about, and you think like, what would you do for your own kid? And then what would you do for those kids that you love? And so, so those are things that's like I would say that's like one of my absolute biggest fears, is losing one of those young men that we love.
And
Uh,
that's real. I mean, that is so real. I mean, for so many different reasons. There's someone here that said, I'm afraid of the district not recognizing what an asset Mr. Mitchell is to our school community.
Thank you.
Yep, sure thing. You got to recognize when you have some good ones.
Yeah.
and the real ones. We are here to serve them, not to be a hindrance. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So you spoke a little bit about, your fear, potentially losing your kids, getting arrested. And those are the, even now with all of this happening, like
Yeah.
receiving that ping, that notification. And I know what it feels like to be in that situation. Talk to us also a little bit about, someone talked about what they're proud of. They're proud of the continued learning in spite of Corona.
Absolutely. So I am proud. So when all of this happened, when we first were displaced, our teachers in our district, so we are a very strong union state, and our teachers didn't have to teach. So part of their contract states that, in case of a natural disaster, teachers are exempt from, just from teaching and from instruction. And so when that happened right away, as soon as we closed, I started teaching because I just enjoy teaching so much. Every single one of my teachers, we have 10 teachers, 4 encore teachers, 3 who teach students with special needs, and every single one of them were on the calls for every grade level that I was teaching.
Wow.
And, I think the true measure of what a leader or a real or an effective leader is,
Say it again, bro.
is how the people around you respond, and how do you empower the people who you are leading. And so, when I'm talking to them, I may say, Dr. So-and-so, or I may call them Dr. Petroni or Dr. Cruz. And so I'm uplifting them, I'm empowering them, because when I leave the building, there's nobody there but the teachers and our dean, and they have to run it themselves. And they do a phenomenal job of that. And so, we work really well. My mom is a union worker. My grandmother is a retired police officer. And so, just that grittiness, and that humility that comes along with that job, and appreciating their work allows me to appreciate and work very well with our unions. But really seeing, how they are thriving. We live in the suburbs, and my son has been at the school with me every step of the way. And so seeing how well he's doing at our little public school, you know what I mean, and how our teachers are like, his kid can almost go anywhere that they want, but they are choosing, this gym.
The fact that you have your son with you at your school speaks volumes. The fact that you are rolling up your sleeves, and even in a state that did not mandate teachers to teach, the fact that you rolled up your sleeves and your teachers were right along there with you speaks volumes of your leadership. Lisa said, I'm afraid less and less Black men will see the importance of this calling and career option. Thank you, sir, for what you're doing. Terrance is doing some amazing job. And I'm so happy to see that you're just walking in your calling, that you're transforming the space that you're, leading, and just thank you for the work. I'm so proud of you. And someone here says, I'm proud to see you go from your self-developed boys club to head of school.
Look at Mrs. Mitchell.
And someone here, 12 dogs, child's place. So speak it louder. I don't want to observe your building in your presence, but I would love to put it on display in your absence queue. Wow, that's amazing. Love it.
Yeah.
Well, Terrance, is there anything, any final thoughts that you want to leave us with this evening?
No, I think look at my notes. No, I think the biggest thing would be, are you inspired or are you motivated? And, if we are motivated, we can easily fall off the track. If we're exercising, we can become unmotivated. If we're eating healthy, we can become unmotivated and fall back into those previous ways. But if we are inspired, inspiration comes from, someone else. And so, if there is somebody who's inspiring you, you don't want to let them down. And I think that's a huge aspect of where we are. I think it also speaks to truth versus a fact. And so the fact is we have a lot of obstacles that are going on, but there is truth in the work that we are doing. And it may not always be something that is very tangible, but what is, in the spiritual and the mental. And so I want people to be inspired. I want you to walk in your space.